Then, welcome to another episode of Escaping the Echo Chamber. And I cannot wait for this one because honestly, I have a really great story about Marie, our guest today, who literally invited me for her community in Berlin. And then, as I know the community in Berlin quite well, I was a little bit skeptical because Marie was so bold to even charge me for this. And I was like, why would I even do this, right? Why is somebody inviting me? But I have to say, and this is where I really, really enjoyed the experience, is probably one of my best community events I've ever been in, because this is definitely something what we will discuss today. Such an experience and such an approach to get to know people in the audience, but also in the community was very unique and very inspiring in the end. It left me with a lot of thoughts, and that's why I needed to get Marie on this podcast with Glenn together. And now, Glenn, please, please, please introduce our guest with her full name.
Yeah, well, Marie Chaproniere, welcome to the podcast. Did I get it? Did I? Was it close? I kind of fit close.
Chaproniere.
Chaproniere, with that French inflection. But Marie, I mean, really super happy to have you on the podcast, and I think we're going to do something very different for this one. We're going to hand the mic over to you to kind of open the conversation before you kind of introduce yourself, because I think that sets the context and tone for the conversation. So over to you, Marie.
Okay. You want me to introduce myself first, though, right?
100%, go for
it. So yeah, thank you so much for the intro. What an introduction, guys. Thank you. So I'm Marie. I am the founder of a community called Behind the Mask. And it is a community for people and culture leaders, primarily based here in the Netherlands. We really focus on bringing people together for these very raw and real and vulnerable conversations where we take off the mask and destigmatize some of these taboo topics that we often don't talk about, particularly in the workplace, but also in general in our lives. And we bring people together through real in-person experiences. So that's one of the experiences that we had the opportunity to host in Berlin, which Matthias joined us for, which was a very intimate dinner of unmasking. And of course, we always pay for our food, but also the experience. The reason, I guess the reason why is also because we don't want to have any vendors in the room or any sponsors, because these are safe environments, and we want it to be about the human first. So if I am to flip the narrative and kickstart this podcast, I want to ask you guys, maybe we'll start with you, Glenn. What is behind the mask, or what masks do you think you're hiding behind, or not?
Yeah, so thank you. I welcome the question. I think it's a really important one. I think for me, when I started to think about this show and kind of what it meant, and then that kind of period of self-reflection, I thought about the first thing that came to my mind was when I was agency side in recruitment. I spent the best part of 10 years agency side, and I never truly felt I was kind of my, should we say, authentic self at work. I think I kind of conformed to the environment, what the expectation was, and ultimately that version of myself was molded by that particular environment, the people around me. And I often reflect now on those people that worked with me for 10 years, what the version of me that they kind of experienced, you know what I mean? Because I can imagine it being quite introverted, quite quiet, socially awkward, sometimes having moments of kind of extroversion and excitement, but overall probably just somebody that was kind of there, but not really part of that kind of inner circle, if you think of it socially. And that was both intentional, because I didn't really feel like I could enter that kind of inner circle and really be my authentic self. So there was almost like, let me keep myself on this kind of periphery. And that, in a sense, was the mask. So I remember the day I left agency, I left all the clothing, the suits, everything that I wore during that 10 minutes, I just left them there. I had
Wow.
absolutely had no need. I mean, there was a locker full of stuff and training in it.
Mm.
That basically everything I just left. I think the only thing I took was like some kind of deodorant and stuff like that I might use going forward. Everything else I just left in the locker. All the suits, everything. It was a moment where I was like, I'm never fucking going back to this. So what's the point in taking any of it with me?
I love that. You didn't need a suit for a wedding or
Not those kind of suits, Marie.
yes.
Recruitment agents have a certain suit type that's specific for the world that they work in. It's not really purposeful
Yeah,
for anything else, you know.
exactly. The blue ties and
Oh
the
god, yeah, 100%.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, interesting. I love that you also spoke about like one, your identity and your characteristics and how that kind of shaped you, but then also you touched on your clothing, which is a huge mask that many of us use to kind of put ourselves in a position of, I guess, acceptance. And that's exactly what you were doing. Also, probably it was policy that you had to, come suited and booted every day in the office, but it didn't quite feel like yourself.
No, not at all. I mean, they kind of flexed it a little bit more, in the last, kind of 18 months or stuff like that. But
Mm,
by that point, it's kind of a marginal change, not really much gain from that.
yeah, nice, thanks. And what about you, Matthias? What's behind yours today?
Do you really want to know? I
Yeah.
just learned. I just learned that everybody has a dark side, but I don't go there. I think. Um,
Let's go
um, what?
there.
Yeah. What a nice segue into the dark side of people. No, I honestly think it's funny when Glenn talked about his start in his career and his agency times. I mean, like a similar experience I have with him, where when I started in my career, it was also very much like Frankfurt am Main, financial quarter, beginning. You didn't know much, but you need to wear a suit, you need to dress up, and a lot of people identified you only by the way you look and nothing else, literally speaking. And that is an environment that I did not enjoy lots, which is why when I then had the chance to go back to university, study for my master's, and then enter the workforce again, I immediately went for startups, environments where nobody cares how you look or how you dress, where people actually care more about what you do in terms of what is your job and so on. But then I also realized a lot that even though a lot of people were more laid back, they also were still masked, right? So from an outside perspective, the suits are gone, but and everybody works or has more business casual approach, right? But in the end they still wear a mask, right? Because you have to be a leader, so you have to show up to a certain way, or you're in HR, yeah, you need to wear your HR mask, right? So they expect a certain behavior there as well. And I think what I learned is, and it took me a time, is this topic of, especially as a leader, when we have this perception that leaders need to have a certain professional approach. They shouldn't show emotions. They have a, let's say, 100% self-control, right? And I think what I learned as a leader after a certain period of time, if you open up to people, if you build authentic and good relationships, this can be so powerful. But the first step is to say, look, I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. I This situation was not good. Let's fix this, right? And to be also bold enough to open up and talk about your weaknesses as well as your strengths, and also maybe share a little bit of your private life to a certain extent. And this has helped me to build more in-depth and close relationships, even though it is very risky, right? Because how do you know as a human being to which person I can open up and talk about things and to whom not? And I think this inner guidance to say, can I open up to Glenn or Marie or to my boss or to the leader? That depends. And I think what I learned over the time is that the more emotional intelligent a person is, the more you can open up and have that in-depth relationship. But if you don't, and you see there's a lack or a gap, you need to somehow navigate a little bit around it, right? Because I do think unmasking to the wrong people can go so wrong.
Yeah, so interesting that you, Glenn, I know that you have some stuff to say, but I just kind of like wrote down and circled when you said it can be risky to show parts of yourself and to be vulnerable. And I find like it's actually risky on both sides, right? So it's risky to show those parts, but it's also risky to show ourselves authentically. I don't know if you're talking about the same thing, but to be authentic is to also be, it's also a bit risky for me, because that sets us up for this rejection. It sets us up for people to judge us. So I think that's also why we're often so hesitant in these spaces, not even just as a leader, but as we saw with like your story, Glenn, in an environment where you're starting out your career, it's also risky to show up as you are because you put yourself then in this position of like vulnerability. And that's not even showing every part of yourself.
Absolutely. And I think what I wanted to kind of really ask is, behind the mask is clearly a mission driven, purpose driven kind of initiative, community, and oftentimes you find that is driven by the founder's own journey. And I was curious just to kind of get a bit of insight into what was the catalyst for behind the mask. How did it kind of come into being?
Try and keep it short. It's just a lot of layers, which is, what masking is in general, right? It's almost like this onion that we're peeling back, like mask by mask, layer by layer. But so I spent the last 15 years working in talent acquisition, and I was really at this intersection in my role where I focused a lot on inclusion, inclusion in the workplace, inclusive hiring processes, but also that bridge to employer branding. And I was leading DE&I and employee resource groups. And I spent the last 5 years working at the same organization and many years working in startups and scale-ups. And back in 2021, the business was acquired and I stayed in the business. There wasn't too much change happening at that time, but there was a pivotal moment where things did start to change. And I wanted to see what it was like to also work in a larger organization. During that time, I was also going through navigating a lot of different things in my personal life. And, I was the change in the organization to kind of go from like a scale up into a more corporate company, with my strong sense of justice. I just found myself in a position where I was constantly challenging the status quo. And, for me, that was like the first sign of the things that I was masking, even though I felt comfortable to raise my opinion and to make changes. I also found that I decided to stay in an environment that wasn't necessarily set up or built for the way in which I was designed and my brain was designed. And I say that because when you enter into a larger corporation, of course, there's a lot more bolts, and a lot less agility almost. And I had this sense of like, we can make a change. So I found myself, let's say the start of 2024, where I was asking myself a lot of questions over, who am I? What's my identity? What do I even like anymore? What's making me happy? Prior to that 6 months, I had just got married. So I had spent a lot of time kind of focusing on the wedding. And then after becomes this almost like a big crash. And then these expectations to start a different life and try for children and so on. So I was facing a lot of different, personal challenges that I wouldn't necessarily speak about within the work environment, as well as a lot of internal friction with my own beliefs and identity. Um, a lot of that led to a burnout. So I was actually already in a burnout that I didn't realize. And the burnout itself, it took me a good year and a half to realize that I was burnt out. I had other people sort of telling me, you're not okay, or that we're worried about you. But I myself wasn't really acting on that. I wasn't aware of it. So June came an official diagnosis with ADHD. And although I had already self-identified with being neurodivergent for a number of years and was comfortable with that, this diagnosis gave me new language and understanding for some of my behaviours. And one of those things was masking. And as you understand your masks, so if we look at neurodivergence as a child, children before the age of 12, or by the age of 12, they would receive 20,000 more negative messages than somebody who is neurotypical. And so when you're receiving so many negative messages, and those messages can be light, they could be, being told to sit still, not speak up, whatever that could look like, you learn those behaviors and you learn to mask in other ways, especially if you're then undiagnosed. So I had this language, and then I started to actually reflect on my life, and I started to reflect on my environments, and I thought, okay, where else am I masking? Where else do I feel as though I haven't been setting my boundaries? So that was let's say the start. And I launched the community Behind the Mask off the back of that, because the more I spoke about my challenges across like mental health or women's health, my neurodiversity, I realized there were so many other people kind of experiencing the same thing as me. And I got into certain conversations with the company that I worked at, and we started to explore more around like values and what authenticity means in the workplace. And my own experiences were that I couldn't be my full self in the workplace, because to me, my full self meant that I can show up and I can share my experiences. And actually, in the work environment that I was in, I was told that I couldn't share all of those experiences if I wanted to step into, a leadership role. There and thereabouts. So it gave a little bit more meaning. I decided to step away from the organisation that I was working for at the time, ultimately because of the misalignment and the values that weren't aligned with my beliefs. And now I had this new understanding of who I was.
What an amazing journey.
Long story.
Anyway, well, I think I just think that kind of process of self-awareness, and then because we can all be self-aware, we can recognize certain situations and scenarios. The difference is often acting on that. And I think, it takes courage, bravery to act on things that you're seeing that, kind of almost diverge from the status quo. So case in point, in terms of, certainly the leadership role. And I think the thing that I'm really interested to kind of circle back to, which kind of Matthias touched upon, is can you genuinely be your authentic self at work? And second to that, does it get more difficult to be your authentic self at work when you progress through, sort of layers of leadership? I'm just keen to kind of get your thoughts on that, and Matthias, kind of pull you back in on this as well. But Marie, genuinely, do you think it's possible for people to be their authentic selves at work?
I think we should accept that there is an authentic version of your work self, and then there is the authentic you. So, I really struggle with this word authenticity, and it comes up also a lot during our dinners and events that we're hosting, because actually to be authentic, and this is also where it's a bit of a challenge, like to be authentic is to be the real version of yourself. And actually, to your point, like how many of us are actually reflecting on who we are, and also reflecting on some of those masks that we're wearing. And if we're not reflecting on the things that we're covering up, the clothes that we're wearing to fit ourselves into certain situations, or we're not reflecting on the masks that we wear that actually are causing us harm, because some of these masks are, my mask to put my makeup on this morning is because I want to feel good, but it's definitely not how I showed up an hour ago before we jumped on a call today, because I was, maybe that's me unmasked. But, some of them are healthy and others are not. So was the question, do we want to bring our full selves to work?
I think it's, so to your point, there's the intention, do we want to? Equally, if we think about the kind of structure of a kind of corporate environment or a working environment, is it even possible? Because there's a lot of talk around, we want you to bring your authentic self to work, but the conditions for that have to be there for that to happen. So is it really is it just a kind of whimsical idea that sounds really nice, but in reality just can't happen? And is it better to have, to your point, an authentic version of yourself in the work context? And that's probably the closest we're going to get to that realistically.
Yeah, it's really tricky. I think it's both. I think it's, it's personal. It's also professional versions of ourselves. It's what feels true to us. I think behind the unmasking, and the reason why we're masking in the first place, is because of the system, the way that the system is also built and the way that it's set up, is why we have to mask in the first place, because of these expectations of how we should behave. And, if we look at maybe like the groups of people that are masking the most, it's often women. Because of those societal expectations and workplace expectations of how a woman should exist, especially in leadership. You'll find that you have to have certain attributes to lead in a role, but those attributes can also be classed as assertive. And if you're too assertive as a woman, then you come across as a bossy bitch. Also women are expected to be feminine. And, what does it mean to be feminine? That's often how we do our hair and how we do our makeup and how we present ourselves. So it's really exhausting. And then, of course, there's other groups, the LGBT community. We have identity, minority groups, neurodiversity in general is the biggest group of those who are masking. And men also mask, but it's, most likely a lower percentage. So, I think if we break down that stigma, that's the whole point, let's say, of Behind the Mask, is that we want to unmask stigmas, because I believe that it's the stigma that we need to tackle, and it's the stigma around these topics, so these taboo topics in general, if that makes sense. We open up a can of worms every time we get into this conversation.
No, and I love it. I think it's brilliant. I think we should have more conversations like that, because to Glenn's point, or is it impossible, yeah, to be your authentic self? I would ask, well, first of all, half of the people don't know what their authentic self is. So how can they actually answer this question, right? Because I think that needs to happen first. Then second, I do think that this approach with work and private, to a certain extent, is true. I think, people are not per default the same person all the time, right? And I think also education, society, how your social group is forming a certain authenticity or certain identity or a certain way of how your values have developed over time. They also not stay all the time the same, right? So they develop as well. So yes, they will have an influence into who you are, and then depending on which workplaces you have seen or chosen, right, you will also get a different style of masking, right? Like when we go back to maybe more of a real case into recruitment or talent acquisition, and we talk about. I feel that, when somebody from enterprise corporate comes into a startup and scale up environment, uh, they somehow need to mask, yeah, because clearly it's a different environment, and clearly this is something that is not always fitting. Let's put it like this, or matching in a while, because it depends a little bit how adaptable people are. And I think with the masking itself, Marie, that's maybe a question to you. Do you think that people automatically mask without even knowing? Like, are we actually masking right now? Because, we are the hosts, and yes, we flip the script and we have great ideas, but literally we're all not authentic right now. Maybe. I don't know. So is it really that you think that there is maybe a certain way of, this happens automatically, and then already the first step would be through self-awareness, identifying that?
Yeah, so if we think about masking and what we're doing with masking, it's literally hiding those parts of yourself to fit into an environment,
Hmm.
to fit in. And it's that cost of doing this consistently. So we can mask, throughout our days, and it become like a natural part of our identity because it's needed. But when we're doing it at the detriment of our own identity, and it goes so far that we now no longer know who we are, that's when we have a problem, right? That
Hmm.
we're masking so much so that we can't see ourselves, which is where I identified with. And it isn't to say that, like my colleagues and the people that I worked with, they didn't get a different version of me. I still have those characteristics. I'm still really silly. Parts of myself still exist, but there were things that I was showing up in a way that didn't feel natural to me. And I was doing it so much so because I wanted to just prove myself or prove that we can make something work. And for me, a lot of those things kind of resonated, also kind of bled out into social groups and social circles.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
over the last couple of years, like to get myself back to health, I've had to set boundaries. I've had to say no to a lot of social events and gatherings, but I feel comfortable now to say no, to say like I'm tired, or it's too much for me, or I just want a night in on my own to recover. Whereas before I would say, I'm going to attend this because I feel as though I'm letting other people down because, of my natural tendency to people please.
Yeah, and my question here, to just continue that thought process maybe a little bit, is there another way than masking? Like, is it just mask or unmask, or is there also a way to say, I will just say no to not mask?
Um, I think it's a continuous journey of self-discovery.
Hmm.
Like, I think that's what it is. So,
Hmm.
I think for me, it's all about listening now to my own needs and understanding what some of those masks are.
Hmm.
I don't think, I mean, that's very neurodivergent as well for us to kind of think like, okay, it's all or nothing.
Yes.
I'm going to completely mask or I'm going to not mask at all. Like there has to be a sort of a middle ground, a middle ground, right? So yes, the healthy way to be is to kind of balance. I think the workplace, there is a level of professionalism, and we should be professional in the workplace. And what professionalism means to me could be different to you. You know, it could, what professionalism in a startup is very different to professionalism within a larger corporate organization. So, you know, I think it's all about like remaining true to who you are, which kind of falls in with the authenticity and getting to know yourself and understanding the things that are kind of taking your energy. But when we are doing it at the detriment of our health, and you know, and that's kind of how we tie our mission as well back to Behind the Mask, is that yes, we're creating this safe space to kind of people to come together to unmask and to show up authentically and to be themselves. But actually this, you know, we want to change workplaces, and when we explore that, what does that mean and how can we connect the dots? That's actually, we're seeing that masking can affect your bottom line, because masking can lead to turnover, it can lead to burnout, mental health challenges, lack of performance, and all of those things have a cost to the organization. So we just, you know, it's new language, it's different language now that we have, but actually if we just take the term masking and we try to simplify it, it's just breaking it down on yeah, how are people showing up as they are, and what does that mean, what does burnout look like? And if we actually have those honest conversations as to why somebody is burnt out, it's most likely because either they've been in, you know, positions that they shouldn't have been in, environments that they shouldn't be in, and that's all down to awareness.
Yeah, I think this is really a good point now to maybe also maybe tell people what are the negative or the consequences of masking, right? So I think Marie already mentioned this. Like, if I think about it now, or what I keep on hearing is that, you know, it has negative impacts on your well-being. Yeah. I looked this also up because I wanted to see a little bit of studies around this as well. So they were saying there's some research saying that teamwork increases by 50% when everybody feels included. Yeah. So instead of masking, there is an environment created which would drive productivity because people don't have to mask. They don't have to go that step or not mask to that extreme. I think that Marie mentioned, right? And also masking creates a false sense of belonging. I think this is so true to everything that we do when we hire new people. We tell them all these crazy things. We oversell the company, and then once they are in, they'll be like, "What is going on?" And that is then definitely something which has also a huge aspect, because why people then maybe drop out after a couple of months because they say, "Not the environment." They have been sold to me, or you know, that's not me what I want. And I think this is also when you look at this topic is I don't want to, well, maybe we also talk about leadership here for once, because I think masking and leadership, there is a connection here. And what I found also as well is when we talk about the dark side, you remember when I started, I learned that everybody has a dark side. Now this gets interesting. Glenn is going to love this. It's like the traits that we talk about, dark traits, are like narcissism, paranoia, aggression, right? And unfortunately, power tends to unmask these traits. So the connection with leaders, the higher they go, the more will unmask, but unmask in the sense of showing more of their dark sides, which that then will harm organizations and other people. So I think when we talk about the consequences of unmasking, there's so much personally, but there's also so much that is connected to how we work in organizations that actually make a pretty good case that, hey, let's take this seriously, no?
Yeah, absolutely.
Glenn, what do you have to say?
Well, I was just kind of reflecting, actually, more than anything, because I think we've kind of addressed how masking. I don't know. This is something that kind of Marie was kind of keen to illustrate, which was, kind of how masking can be a coping mechanism, essentially. And actually, sometimes that's intentional, that's conscious, sometimes it's unconscious. I kind of reflect on the story that I told at the top of the podcast, that I think it was very kind of almost unconscious, but it was genuinely kind of masking as a coping mechanism to be in that sort of social environment or that working environment. And now we've kind of almost moved this thread along to kind of what unmasking can do, from perhaps, to your point, what you just outlined in terms of perhaps unmasking negative traits. I was just keen to sort of flip it slightly and lean into, kind of how unmasking can be a slightly more positive and kind of powerful thing. Yes, it might be scary. Yes, it might, kind of take a bit of courage and bravery. But, on the other side, and I'm not asking you necessarily to talk to specific conversations within the community, but what have you seen as a positive result of unmasking in some of the conversations? And Matthias, you were at one of the dinners, so perhaps you could, kind of give us some insight in terms of, how you felt in that particular environment.
Yeah, it is really interesting because, of course, I knew most of the people who were at the the event, sorry. But I never knew them from the unmasking perspective. So that meant it opened to me a completely different perspective around people that I know for some time, where I was like, oh my God, this is interesting. And interesting not in terms of curiosity to learn how other people struggle, but I think, and this goes into very well into this concept of also this podcast, Escaping the Echo Chamber, is you see these people in the community on LinkedIn, let's call this our social number one place to go, talking about their success stories and how great they are and what they have achieved and how amazing these people are. And suddenly they open up to you and they say, well, we're just normal people with our day-to-day struggles, with our crisis that we have to manage, with who we are. And you get, for me personally, I got a really deep connection to them, and a deeper connection to them than if I would just have a chat, maybe a small talk on a community event about a certain topic. It went directly into, you are authentic to me, you're relatable to me, I hear you, it's interesting, I experienced the same thing, and it almost felt like we became friends overnight.
I
Is
love that.
is that what you're seeing through the community, Marie? I mean, I'm kind of keen to sort of see, kind of understand if there are certain themes and sub-themes that are kind of reoccurring through the community events you're putting on.
Yeah, I think definitely I've seen a lot of this. Even after Berlin, I had a couple of people sort of reach out to me to say, like, what a great evening that we had the opportunity to actually hold space. There was a couple of people there that also didn't know each other that I know connected that same evening, even though it was like 11 p.m., I think, by the time we left the restaurant, that went for a walk after. Just a walk together to just chat and connect over things that maybe they wouldn't have connected with before. I've spent personally a lot of time going to different networking events as well. And I know that I struggled a lot with networking. At the time, I didn't realize that a lot of that was because of the neurodivergence, that I found things really overstimulating and very high level. Like, I want to know your deepest, darkest secrets and really connect with people. So, for me, it's absolutely perfect because we actually can reach that deeper level a lot faster than we ever would normally. And like, you had mentioned that that it's just a very vulnerable and human experience to share parts of yourself. We often find that people are also getting a bit of a release. Parents that are coming to the events, that by the time it gets to them and they're taking the mask off, you're finding that people are already in tears and like that emotion's just sort of coming out, that if you're not in therapy or anything like that, like when are you getting that space? So that's kind of what I create with the dinners, is that I just call it kind of like a moment to hold space for one another. And we're not we're not giving anyone the answer to things that they're sharing. We're just letting them share, and that's it. You don't need anything else. You don't need a hug. You don't need like a pat on the knee to let people know that you're going to be okay. So I see a lot of that. Besides that, we've got a really intelligent, smart group of people and culture leaders in the room. So not only is there human connection, there's also business connections and networking that actually does happen. And I see coffee meetups and lunches that are also existing, and opportunities that are being presented through these experiences as well. As you were talking, I just wrote down some of the notes because, it's there's a lot of negative connotation around showing up authentically, but also then to, through my own experiences and others, to wear that mask, it did lead me into a burnout. I was burnt out. I was suffering with anxiety and identity, and going through a lot of grief as well, of who was I, and why did I not recognize these parts of myself, or how would have life been maybe different? So I want to also just kind of spin that sense of belonging that you mentioned already. But the other pathways are that if we show up a little bit more, like if we take off some of the masks, not all of them, we're definitely leading to a better, more increased well-being, more engagement. So I walked away from an organization with misalignment, and I am now a version of myself that I feel really comfortable with. I never would have jumped on a podcast a year ago. Never. I didn't have the confidence because I always felt as though I had to present in a way that people expected me to, which isn't the case. Now I feel unmasked because I'm talking about things that I want to talk about, and apparently people like to listen. So I feel more engaged. I feel that I also have more authentic connections. I have way more authentic connections. Now my circle exists of people who are equally as bonkers, um, that also want to have really deep and vulnerable conversations. The opportunities it's led me to is just wild. And as I said, like I wear now a lot less masks than I did before. And apparently that does resonate with people, and people actually like me, which, I'm not sure if I'd go that far, but it's that sense of, oh, okay, I can be myself, and actually I'm all right. Like, I guess I'm a little bit interesting from time to time.
We can certainly attest to the fact that you are liked, Marie. That's for sure. Right? Let's not leave that hanging out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let's not leave that hanging out there. I kind of just as we kind of think about kind of sort of the latter part of this conversation, what I'd like to do is kind of almost present to you a scenario. So I'm kind of in a kind of startup scale up. I'm a people leader. I kind of feel like some of the things that you're saying resonates with me, but I'm super nervous about the idea of joining one of your community events.
Oh. Is that you actually, or?
Yeah, Glenn, it's Glenn.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it can be if you want to. I mean, I don't think I'd be particularly nervous about joining one of your community events, to be fair. But for the context of the kind of audience and stuff like that, I can hear what you're saying. I'm kind of connecting to some of the things, your story, but the prospect of sitting in a room with peers that I may or may not know, and kind of really, removing that mask, probably, kind of makes me super nervous. It might even scare the shit out of me a little bit. What would you say to me, given that kind of context?
I think a lot of people feel this. They just don't generally tell me before the event. Also, no one really knows what they're stepping into. And I think that is the beauty of it. The writing's on the wall that this is going to be a safe space. So you should be able to walk in and expect that this is a safe environment where people have the opportunity to be seen and heard. We're also not forcing anyone to be vulnerable. We're not forcing anyone to share things that they don't want to share. It's all within your boundaries. So, there's a number of different prompts that we would give people. And the beauty of being vulnerable, and I reflect on this a lot when we look at leadership, is that you have to lead by example. You can't ask people, this isn't psychological safety if we're asking people to be vulnerable, but we are also not showing them that it's safe to do so. So, you can expect that you're never going to go across your boundaries. We'll always have people in the room that have already been to our experiences in the past. If you want to come and also not share anything and just enjoy the food and enjoy the great people around you and open conversation, that's also fine. And yeah, just come as you are. Like, everyone is welcome.
I want to add a couple of more points because what I found super interesting, because it was not very clear for me. I also struggled. Why would I come? Right? I still remember this. I even gave Marie the feedback. I was like, what is this all about? I don't get it. Right? Um, but what I found very interesting when I entered the room, and there were a couple of things that made this unique because I haven't seen this so far, is first of all, there was no alcohol served. Yeah.
Mm,
So no alcohol at all. Then, second, was also very interesting is you have a clear set of rules. Yeah.
mm.
So it's not like, hey, let's share. Glenn, why don't you start? And then you don't know what's going on. So there are different
Don't give away all
questions.
my secrets, okay? You have to.
Oh, sorry. I'm not allowed.
No,
No,
you.
but
It's
no,
important.
but there is a structure, right, to do this. I think it's important. And then last but not least, I think which was really important here is you're listening. You're not judging, you're not asking questions, you not make any comments, you just listen. Yeah? And for me, honestly, as Glenn, you know me by now, yeah, a bit more, to tell me to shut up and listen only is hard for me. Because I'm listening. I'm listening and I
No
resonate with
comment.
so many resonate with so many topics and I would
Mm.
immediately jump in and I was like, oh my God, what do I do? So I really struggled with my inner self, how to do this. And I don't mean it in a bad way, right? But like I actually want to help people. This triggered me first. Like I want to help people. I would love to give them advice or context, but no, you just sit there and listen. So I think these are small, tiny things, but they are so powerful because this is something where, when you start sharing, and then there was another thing that was super interesting to see. So let's imagine you have 15 people or 20 people, yeah? And then the first 7 or 8 start. And of course, for the first one, it's always hard, right? If you are the first one. But what was super interesting to see that once the table turned and somebody started crying, almost everyone else after that also started crying. It literally had a chain, like a chain reaction in that sense, but it gave that opportunity to really open up, right? And I think this was very well designed, Marie. I think you did this on purpose. And this is design because design and structure,
Yeah.
kind of channel behaviors. And I think this is something that for the people, to go back to your question, Glenn, the people that have anxiety, like they don't know, they don't want to share, they're afraid to go. These by design are somehow also protective and protected. So it's not like this is chaos and just open up and talk. There are also little tiny things that will help you to have a safe space as well.
Yeah,
Amazing.
exactly. And we're
I'm
always
bought
open
in.
to conversation, right? If people want to know more, I think people actually enjoy turning up to something where they don't fully know what they're going to be experiencing. And every space is different. Like, it's a human first community, and I think that's the most important thing. So,
Mm.
we don't have we have name tags, of course, because I curate the tables intentionally as to who is sitting next to who and so on. But also we remove titles. Like, we know we've got some really smart, great people in the room, but it's not about that. It's about the human experience. And I think that, when we look at that also in the workplace, you spoke about it. It's workplace design, it's experience design. And that is the most important element that we often forget when we're talking about belonging and inclusion. Not just to bring people in, but how we design those spaces so people see the representation and actually belong.
Amazing. So I'm interested. How do I access the next event? When is it? Where is it? Tell us more. What's the process, Marie?
The process. So I've now I've now centralized everything for a number of different reasons. I spent the last year kind of doing a lot of outreach, connecting with people who we wanted to be at these events, and using ticketing systems. But it all can become a little bit chaotic. Also, when you've got people sort of reaching out to you that maybe in time get an opportunity to sign up to an event, or they want an invoice that I can't provide through a ticketing system and all of that jazz. So I've now launched a platform, which is where I host everything. So it's a platform to really essentially access the network. So connect with other leaders who are like-minded, that have attended our experiences before. At the moment, I'm only really letting people in that have experienced our dinners, so you know what to expect. We also really focus on in-person experiences. I'm not really doing anything online. I'm not creating an online community at this point. So I'll send you the links to the website, also to sign up to the community. And that's where you can also get access to discounted events, free events, partner offerings, and so on.
And Glenn, you need to be a decent human being. That's the first requirement, to enter this community.
You say that in a way that I might not meet the criteria, Matthias.
No?
It's kind of almost like it's sort of framed in a way that's like, look, Glenn, you're on the fence, mate. You may or may not get in, so don't build your expectations up too much.
You're invited. You're invited.
But we'll put all the links into all of the content that we put out to the community, Marie. But genuinely, I am from a
I also
personal
have to
perspective.
announce, sorry,
Oh,
Glenn.
go on.
I have an event coming up. Can I also?
Yes, I was going to tag that in. When's the next event?
So the next event is actually coming up at the end of November. So in the next 4 weeks, we hosted an event back in April, and we had a speaker who's been on your podcast, actually, Glenn, Bianca Arrigo, from Human OS. So Human OS are a partner of ours, and they offer a wellbeing solution in the workplace, focused around sustainable high performance, with amazing coaches and everything else. So on a quarterly basis, we're actually going to be hosting, or let's say Behind the Mask is going to be hosting these experiences, which are full-day experiences, and I call them masterminds. They're, again, very intimate, just 12 people in the room, along with our partner. And this time it's going to be a mix of, let's say, like wholesomeness and healing combined with strategy. So I want to kind of bring all of that together, that how to connect with yourself and reconnect and unmask, as well as transform yourself, transform our workplaces. So you can expect a community feel, with the aesthetic and the way that I design things. Senior people and culture leaders. You can expect a very impressive keynote by Bianca. We're going to do some peer-to-peer sort of mastermind sessions. We're going to do some live coaching with one of the coaches from Human OS, and a community dinner. So we're going to end on dinner, which is going to be slightly different to our dinner experiences, but it will be a chef-cooked Caribbean style event. So I'm very much looking forward to it.
You and Bianca, that is a powerhouse duo. And if people are kind of thinking, oh, that sounds quite interesting, don't think, just do. Get signed up. I want to be there, but
Right.
you know, it's kind of like, yeah, that's
Yeah, where
wicked.
is
But
my invite?
yeah,
You are invited, but you have to pay, I'm afraid. I'm not
Nah.
yet in the position. I'm not yet in the position where we have. So yeah, so it's an event where I'm inviting our partner to kind of
yeah,
collaborate, and the
that's
idea is
cool.
that our HR leaders also get access to our
Yeah,
partner, because if we want to change workplaces, then we need to introduce them to the right partners as well to be able to do that. But it's
100%.
in Amsterdam, so anyone in Germany, the UK, please come join us.
100%. Well, Marie, from my
Cool.
perspective, thank you so much for being a guest. I mean, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Over to you, Matthias, for closing thoughts.
Closing thoughts. I think the purpose of today should have been for people who have not heard about masking or unmasking, I think, to really read upon it, check the community out, but also make themselves familiar and maybe take a bit of time to get to know themselves a bit better, and maybe try to figure out what mask they wear. I think if we kind of trigger that, then I'm all more than happy, and mission completed and successful. I have met Marie now a couple of times and talked to her, so I think this was a very great start to really good conversation. I'm really looking forward to this, so it was a really pleasure to have her on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marie.
Thank you, guys. It was lovely to meet you. You made it very, very comfortable and very easy to fully unmask, and appreciate being here.